A ceasefire between Afghan forces and the Taliban has ended, with reports of renewed fighting on Wednesday morning. The end of the three-day ceasefire on Tuesday night came after hundreds of Taliban prisoners were released as part of a U.S. deal with the insurgent group. The ceasefire was announced by the Taliban for the Eid celebrations at the end of Ramadan.
These men are among hundreds of prisoners the Afghan government has released as part of a three-day ceasefire deal with the Taliban. A move most here were not expecting. I spent 6.5 years in Bagram prison. I'm still almost speechless. It's such a surprise. It's only when I saw reporters that I realized we're free. We have no media access inside the prison. I didn't know we'd be free today. Before being released, prisoners had to sign written pledges not to take up arms again. As per the guidelines of our leaders and based on the agreement, we will not return to the battlefield. We are committed to the leadership's orders and we will continue our life normally. After nearly 19 years of fighting, many here hope this ceasefire could mark a turning point, as does the Afghan government, who've released these prisoners in an effort to extend peace talks with the Taliban. We request that the ceasefire continues so that the Afghan people can rest and that we can turn this peace effort that we have made into a process that will pave the way for the release of all prisoners and the forthcoming peace talks. While the status of these talks remains fragile and any possible outcomes still lie far in the future, this ceasefire has given these men a new lease on life.
Well, for more now, let's cross straight over to Kabul, where correspondent Ali Latifi is covering events for us on the ground there. Tell us, what's the status of the ceasefire now that this prisoner release has happened?
So it seems as if the ceasefire is holding. There were a couple of instances in the east of the country implemented by both sides of the conflict, but so far it seems as if it's holding. But one thing is, I was recently in Maidan Wardak province in the east, and I saw that, there were convoys of released Taliban prisoners coming down the road, with flowers and cameras and, 10, 12 cars at a time, welcoming them back. And what was really interesting is that on the road from the provincial capital to the districts, where usually there's very little security forces presence, especially out on the road itself with their vehicles and with the actual police and military, you saw that this time not only were the convoys passing by, but that there were military Humvees and that there were police forces stopped on the road, ready in case anything happened. But so far it seems as if, the Taliban is making sure that their prisoners get back safely without being caught in crossfire and without risking anything. And I think that the government is being overly cautious to make sure that, their worst fear of these people returning to battle doesn't come true.
What does this prisoner release mean for the peace process in Afghanistan? Because there's a lot riding on the negotiations underway currently between the Taliban and the Afghan government.
It's actually a very big deal, because what we're seeing is that the Taliban has reacted very positively. Their representative in Doha, their spokesman in Doha, sent out, a statement saying that they're happy with what the other side is doing, which is a very different use of terminology. In their reference to the Kabul government, they also assured that they would start releasing more of the government prisoners in considerable amounts, they said. So the hope is that because the Taliban, implemented this ceasefire themselves after a very bloody month of April, the hope is that this prisoner release will give some confidence to the Taliban, and it will also give some confidence to the government that these fighters won't return to the battlefield, and that, finally these intra-Afghan talks can become much more of a reality, and they can move towards actually holding them.
Ali, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. That was correspondent Ali Latifi there in Kabul.